guys. Thanks all of you for coming out. NATO was created originally to defend us against the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union does not exist anymore. Why has NATO persisted for 3 decades? Why has NATO doubled its membership from 15 to 30 members when there is no Soviet Union? What possible reason do they have for doing that? The world did not begin on February 24th, 2022. What was happening for 3 decades? NATO is an aggressive, offensive organization. When they killed Gaddafi, that was not defensive. When they bombed Afghanistan, that was not defensive. When they destroyed Syria, that was not defensive. When they destroyed Yugoslavia and carved it up, that was not defensive. This is part of a salami tactic. They are trying to inch closer and closer towards Russia's borders. This has been a valid, legitimate security issue that the Russians have had long before anyone ever heard of Vladimir Bloody Putin. Okay? The thing is that we lied to the Russians. Our diplomats and our ambassadors told them in the 2+4 negotiations that we will not expand NATO. That was a lie. We not only expanded NATO, we swallowed and absorbed the former Soviet satellite states, meaning Russia's neighbors. Any country on earth would consider that an aggressive posture. If China began forming a military alliance with Ireland and France and Germany, we would be very pissed off, and legitimately so. Why do the Russians not have the right to legitimate security concerns on their own borders? They do, just like any other country. This is part of the salami tactic. This is encirclement. Everywhere Russia is present, we go and provoke them. In Sudan, Russia enjoys good relations with both sides that are warring right now, meaning Dagalo and Burhan. Russia enjoys significant interest in the mining and gold industry in Sudan. Now Sudan is upside down. Syria has been a Russian ally for decades. Now Syria is upside down. Ukraine used to be part of Russia, and now Ukraine is upside down. If NATO is defensive, why did they sabotage the peace deal? Last year, in spring, Russia and Ukraine signed a draft peace agreement. Our Prime Minister, right there, went to Turkey and sabotaged the peace deal. He told Zelensky to pull out of the peace talks, and Zelensky did as he was told. And the sad thing is that they're just using him. Just last month in the NATO summit, look how he tried to embarrass them and upstage them and shame them into allowing Ukraine to join. They don't want Ukraine to join because Ukraine is a tool. Ukraine is a shield NATO hides behind in order to provoke the Russians and make money. The truth is that peace is bad for business. You cannot make money from weapons and war when there is peace. The military-industrial complex in this country and in the United States, our American cousins, are hell-bent on emptying their stocks. On top of that, we have the United States, which runs NATO, using NATO as a tool to control Europe. I mean, they destroyed our civilian public infrastructure. They blew up Nord Stream. That is not a military target. That is a political and economic target. That is a disgusting act of terrorism. I've never seen an act of terrorism disappear so fast from the news cycle in my life. They use NATO to weaken Russia. Control Europe, weaken Russia. That is the strategy. So where is this war taking Ukraine today? How is Ukraine faring? Not very well. The counteroffensive, this much-hyped counteroffensive, is a bloody disaster. I have seen horrific videos of Ukrainian and Russian men lying maimed, crippled, dead on the fields of battle, and it is a horrifying sight. Why is this being done? What is the purpose of this? Russia is well dug in. They have superior fortifications, trenches, tank traps, ditches. And there are two things that are being used the most in this war. The two most important things are drones and artillery. Russia has better drones and more artillery. Russia fires in 2 days what the United States takes a month to produce. That means the United States need hundreds of years to catch up with Russia's production of 155mm artillery shells. This is a losing strategy. You cannot win. The idea that Russia will suffer a total defeat is lunacy. This is unrealistic at this point in time. The proof is in the pudding. Look on the battlefield. And Russia is firing 60,000 shells a day. That's a figure from Ukrainian officials in the New York Times and PBS. It's not the Russians saying that, it's the Ukrainians who are saying that. 60,000 shells a day. Do you know how much that is? That is ridiculous. This is like World War I. Not just the counteroffensive failed, it's the war that's failing. Look at the sanctions, these brilliant sanctions. It's not Russia's economy that's been crushed, it's our economy that's been crushed. Gas prices are higher here, not in Russia. The rent is up here, not in Russia. People can't afford food, they can't afford to pay their bills here, not in Russia. Last year the ruble was the best performing currency in the world. Meanwhile, the pound and the euro have been weakened. Well done. Looks like that's working out really well. I mean, the blowback from these sanctions is truly something to behold. It's really a phenomenal failure. This is the first time that the West are getting a small taste of what it means to put sanctions on another country. The war not only continues, but it escalates. We are sending depleted uranium to Ukraine. This will cripple and kill people for generations to come, just like it is doing in Iraq right now, in Fallujah. The delivery of cluster munitions is another form of escalation. Russia has moved Wagner Group into Belarus. That's escalation. Russia has moved nuclear weapons into Belarus. That's also escalation. This is a big problem. Despite NATO losing on the battlefield, or if you want to be optimistic and call it a stalemate, the threat of nuclear war is omnipresent. If NATO feel that they're backed into a corner, despite them having started this war or helped to start it, they might act irrationally. It just takes a small mistake, a miscalculation, human error, computer error, and this planet will be flushed down the toilet. This is not a joke. During the Cold War, many times we have come this close to blowing each other up. Now, today's the anniversary of the Hiroshima bombing. Now, this film Oppenheimer was released recently, and with all respect to Mr. Nolan and Mr. Murphy, whose work I admire, this is a good film, but it fails to explore key issues. Was bombing Japan with a nuclear weapon necessary? This is unexplored in the movie, in the film. They don't talk about this. The truth is that there was no need to bomb Japan with a nuclear weapon. You hear people say, well, Japan was not going to surrender. We had to bomb Japan because they just won't surrender. If we bomb Japan with a nuclear weapon, we will save lives by preventing an invasion. What a load of bollocks. You don't have to take my word for it. I'm going to read you some quotes from U.S. admirals and generals fighting the Japanese in the Pacific theater. There is no higher authority, there are no better experts to talk about this subject. Allow me a moment. 3 of the 4 chairmen of Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time said the bombing was unnecessary. Admiral Ernest King said that a naval blockade would be better than using atomic weapons. General Henry Arnold said that conventional bombing was the way to go. Dwight Eisenhower and Douglas MacArthur opposed the bombing. Admiral William Lee, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was appalled at effects of radiation and argued that atomic bombs were unnecessary and immoral. These are the men, the top brass, fighting the Japanese. I think they know what they're talking about. Lee said that, quote, employment of the atomic bomb in war would take us back in cruelty towards non-combatants to the days of Genghis Khan. In being the first to use it, we had adopted an ethical standard common to the barbarians of the Dark Ages. Sounds nice. The real reason on this date The real reason the United States used an atomic weapon against Japan was a show of force against the Soviet Union. That's the truth. It was a show of force against the Soviets. I mean, Jesus Christ, talk about provocation. This kick-started an arms race, and we are living with the consequences of that arms race. The world is littered with nuclear weapons, and at any moment, you could have a nuclear war. I've spoken to many people who worked during the Cold War, some of them in the CIA. I interviewed others who were in the military, and they all say the same thing. We are now closer to nuclear war with Russia than ever before, even during the Cuban Missile Crisis. I can't even wrap my head around that. Think of how dangerous that is. We are closer now to nuclear war with Russia than in the Cold War. Now, if you think that Russia's red lines are a bluff, this is not a game of poker. Do you really want to wait and see if they use nuclear weapons or not? I don't. The Russians said, for example, if Ukraine is given F-16s, they're not going to wait and see whether that F-16 is carrying a nuclear warhead. They will treat every F-16 as a nuclear threat. Do you really want to wait and see if the Russians are bluffing? Do you really want to test that? It's not a game of poker. Don't flush the planet down the toilet. This is lunacy. And if you think that the effects of nuclear war are a joke, I'll read you something else. If 500 warheads were to hit major US and Russian cities, 100 million people would die in the first half an hour and tens of millions would be fatally injured. Most of them would die in the following months from radiation sickness and disease epidemics. In addition to climate disruption, ozone depletion and famine, and agricultural collapse, you would also have a nuclear winter. I know that sounds dystopic because it is dystopic. The truth is that NATO and NATO's behavior are isolating us. The BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, are saying, you know what, screw this. We think we're going to go build our own monetary and financial system. In 2 weeks, the BRICS countries will meet in South Africa and announce a gold-backed trade currency. If they don't do it in 2 weeks, they'll do it, it's just a question of time. They'll do it in good time, very, very soon. This is coming. They are already ditching the dollar. You have countries that are buying oil now in rupees. They're buying oil in rubles. This is not good for the West. NATO's behavior is isolating the West. People are so sick of us and our sanctions that they're running away. We have sanctioned so many people, we've sanctioned ourselves. You know, what's sick is that you have troops, Ukrainian troops in England right now being trained and just used as cannon fodder. American troops, British troops, right? Because we're right here in front of the cenotaph, in front of the memorial. They're being used as cannon fodder. They go and kill innocent people, they get PTSD, they come back here, they sleep rough, they're homeless, treated like shit. Where's the respect and honor for those veterans? Government doesn't care. The cannon fodder. Government doesn't care. And what about the bigger issue here? The primary victims are the civilians, not the troops. The primary victims, the ones who suffer the most, are the civilians in Ukraine, in Syria, in Afghanistan. All these countries have one thing in common: NATO aggression. It's clear that the situation in Ukraine needs resolving. This cannot go on. This is lunacy. This is horrific. It's a massacre. But a military solution does not work. Look at the proof. Our Prime Minister told Zelensky to pull out of peace talks, and now the war has been raging on for over a year. You have millions of refugees displaced internally and externally. You have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people killed. What kind of winning strategy is that? That's not a winning strategy. That's only a winning strategy for the arms manufacturers. It's not a winning strategy for us. It's not a winning strategy for Ukraine. The truth is that NATO destroy every country they touch. They destroyed Syria, they destroyed Afghanistan, and they're destroying Ukraine just so they can encircle Russia and make money. What does work is diplomacy, and it's time that we told this government to serve us. This government has to serve us, the British people. Not arms manufacturers, not BAE Systems, not Raytheon, not Lockheed Martin, not General Dynamics. Us. You serve us, the British people. You don't serve weapons dealers. You don't serve imperialist swines. You serve us. You work for us. It's time to remind them who they work for. We demand that this government stop committing crimes in our name. We demand this government stop dirtying and staining our flag, staining our names, committing war crimes, committing crimes against humanity in our name. They need to stop and pull out of NATO, dissolve NATO, abandon NATO, just like the Warsaw Pact was dissolved. That is the only way forward. All we've done, all Boris Johnson has done, all this government have done is prolong the war. They don't give a crap about people in Ukraine. All they care about are the arms manufacturers and making sure that Russia is encircled. Yes to peace talks, yes to diplomacy, no to NATO, and no to war. That's it.